There have been many fighting games over the years, many franchises that started out as a single arcade cabinet at your local bowling alley or pizza shop. As the player base increased, the games gained more notoriety and consequently went on to become legendary in the video game annals. In times gone by, most people will remember two games that were the first to achieve this level of widespread enthusiasm and enjoyment among fans. One was Street Fighter II, and the other, Samurai Shodown. It's hard sometimes to talk about one without mentioning the other, mostly because back in the early 90s, either you played the hand-to-hand fighting game or that other fighting game with weapons. Samurai Shodown and its released sequels have garnered very high praise throughout the years, with Samurai Shodown 2 being considered one of the greatest fighting games ever released, not to mention being one of SNK's highest selling games of all time. But let's not get too out there and start at the beginning. Around the early 90s, people were raving about Street Fighter II. It was all we talked about, thought about, saved our quarters for. As far as arcade fighting games go, we thought it couldn't get any better. Street Fighter II was released by Capcom into arcades in 1991. The fighting scene would never be the same again. Now, while Capcom's giant ruled the roost for years to come after that, there was yet another game company in Japan that was building its own giant. The company, SNK. The game, Samurai Shodown. A vastly different take on the one-on-one fighter. The main difference? Street Fighter II, you just fought with your arms and legs, throwing punches, an occasional Hadouken, or a roundhouse kick. In Samurai Shodown, the developers added weapons, controllable pets that could fight, magical attacks, random items tossed from the background to change the outcome of the fight, and a lot more violence. Yes, this was still a few years before the bloodbath that Mortal Kombat would become, so slashing at an opponent and watching a huge splash of blood come flying out was pretty new. On to the games. Now, because for some reason SNK decided to add the cartridge size on the front of all their boxes, I'm going to list the size of each game as I talk about it. 118 megs, Samurai Shodown. The original that started it all. Released by SNK in 1993, it was the new arcade fighting game on the block. The bad part? You had to find arcades that actually had the game in order to play it, as opposed to Street Fighter II, which had a longer time to get machines out to more locations. You're given a short instructional rundown of what the buttons do, the controls, etc., which I thought was a neat idea by SNK, especially compared to other arcade games where years of pounding on buttons rubbed off the text, so you had to guess at what the buttons actually were or what they did. You'll notice that the sprite detail and color palette are far beyond what Street Fighter was capable of. This is because the hardware the game was built around, the SNK MVS hardware, utilized two processors instead of just one. This allowed the Neo Geo hardware to have a sprite limit nearing 400 and a color palette around 65,000 colors, which was nearly 5 times the sprite limit of the Super Nintendo and easily double the color palette as well. One of the coolest things I remember from back in the day was the game's ability to zoom in and out depending on how close the two characters were. This added a lot of adrenaline rush to play and just looked cool. You have the choice of 12 fighters. My personal favorite for the original game is usually Haomaru, simply because his attacks hit hard and his special moves are easy to learn, as opposed to, say, Yukio, whose flying flame jump, insert Japanese name here, I've never learned how to do consistently. Another neat addition to the game is if you both attack each other, at the same time you enter a duel mode, where you have to mash the A button in order to overpower your opponent. Whoever wins the duel gets disarmed until they pick their weapon back up. The background sprite details are fantastic, and is one of the reasons that the Neo Geo and its arcade hardware were so much in demand, and why the home system still has a user base, albeit funneled mostly through eBay. 202 megs, Samurai Shodown 2. The sequel to the original, released in 1994, Samurai Shodown 2 is my all-time favorite fighting game, and to me is one of the greatest arcade games I or you ever played. That is, if you had a chance to play it when arcades still existed. I remember this being one of the first games, besides Street Fighter 2, that you actually had to wait in line to get your ass kicked. There have been several additional characters added, most notably Caffeine Nicotine and Tam Tam. I never knew it at the time, but Cham Cham's little monkey pet is actually Tam Tam reincarnated, which is why he is able to do the flaming tiger fireball attack. For some reason I never connected the dots before. The graphics have been slightly overhauled, with characters, attacks, and backgrounds having more detailed animations. The POW meter returns, but in this iteration, when it's fully powered up, you can unleash a super attack, which if delivered successfully will cause massive damage to the opponent and make their weapon explode, leaving them without it for a minute or two until it respawns. One of the nice things about this is that it also tells you above the POW meter how to do the super attack. Unlike, say, Fatal Fury Special, where you have super moves, but unless you read a certain issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, you'd have no damn idea how to do them. .282 megs, Samurai Shodown 3. The third game in the series, released in 1995, was a huge departure from the previous two games. You'll notice right off the bat that the graphics and sprites have gone through a major overhaul, and that the art style is far more aggressive in this game. The characters are about 50% bigger, and while their animations are a lot more fluid, I find it distracting because they're almost overly animated in a way, if that makes any sense. I never really liked Part 3 because SNK changed way too much about the series that we'd grown to love over the years. Now there's all sorts of weird shit like counterattack bonuses, the ability to charge your POW meter at will, the stupid dodge move, the choice between slash or bust, which to this day I still don't understand what the hell the difference is. Plus, you have to choose a low, medium, or high grade, which gives a little more variation, but it's just way too much shit to select before even starting a match. Whatever happened to just picking a character and boom, you're off and killing? The blood spurts are more graphic, which I do like though. The roster has been trimmed slightly, adding a few new characters and removing some older ones. Probably at the bottom of the list is Basara, who is one of the stupidest characters ever in a Samurai Shodown franchise. There are other stupid characters we'll get into later, especially in Samurai Shodown 5. 378 megs, Samurai Shodown 4. I never got a chance to play this game in the arcades, and around this time is when the PlayStation 1 was nearing its launching, so quite a lot of attention was being moved away from social gaming and turning more towards home gaming. SNK listened to loyal fans, and did away with some of the bad features that players didn't like from the previous release. Thankfully, they got rid of the stupid fucking dodge move, and aerial blocking was cut out as well. Charging your POW meter was sliced, the supply dude running in the background was cut out, the addition of the C plus D combo was added. Tam Tam was also re-added to the game as a selectable character, which is always good. Unfortunately, the slash bust bullshit is still here, as well as the stupid grade selection. Why is Gelford now fighting in the smoldering ruins of some temple grounds? Where the hell is the boat docks at sunset? Bring that back. 708 megs, Samurai Shodown 5. One of the last games to ever be produced for the Neo Geo, Samurai Shodown 5, I feel, is a great way to end the series that so many of us came to cherish. It continues to refine what didn't work in Part 4 and improved on certain items. The fighter selection has been toned down a little, with the majority of players' favorites still included. Samurai Shodown 5 was released in 2003, roughly a 7-year gap from the previous installment. The slash bust component has been completely removed, thank God, although smaller customizations are still present. I'm going to review the special version of the game, although the majority of things are the same as in the normal version. The sprite detailing is sort of a cross between Samurai Shodown 2 and 3. I like it. The health bar is back to a normal single gauge instead of 2 gauges. They re-added A plus B as the powerful attack instead of having it be the C button, which really sucked. The character roster is humongous, with even more added players and a lot of returning classics. One of the doofiest characters besides Basara, this giant ugly mutant zombie thing called Kurosagero. I think his design was based on Earthquake and having a huge character, but other than that, he's just annoying and totally doesn't fit into the game whatsoever. Tam Tam is still here. Yay! Plus there's also like Evil Haomaru, which I find humorous as well. Lastly, you're now able to pick Zanguro, who was the final boss in Samurai Shodown 3. I could never figure out how he is able to handle his weapon. It always looked like his arms were reversed. My favorite is probably Yoshitora, mainly because his attacks hit well and he carries an arsenal of katana swords on his back, which just kicks ass. Now, there was a 6th release in the franchise, but since it was released on a 6th generation game console, I'm going to omit it from this review. Looking back on Samurai Shodown, it's interesting to see how far the series has come. It will have its 20th anniversary next year, and I'm glad I've been a gamer since the series was created, and brought about the firestorm in the arcades of years past. If you've never played any of the games in the series, I highly recommend Samurai Shodown 2, or even the original one. They're both classics. Check them out.